Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christopher Pugh, and I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Mr. Carlos dos Santos, the ambassador of Mozambique to the United States. Today we're going to get to know him a little bit, and we're going to ask him for his expertise and his tutelage on how we can be better citizens, not only to our current country, but to the entire world. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. First of all, I'd like to just ask you, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I love to be here. Statesboro is a wonderful place to be. Great people. I met a good number, and I'm enjoying my stay. And this university is a wonderful place to be. And the program I'm attending, the AU model, is a wonderful program. I feel so happy to be faculty with the promoters of the initiative,
yes,
the founders of the initiative, and the students who are now delegates in this conference.
What type of energy have you felt from the students and all the people that you just mentioned? What kind of energy do you feel for these people?
Well, very positive energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of determination and commitment to the cause. This is really, it made me believe that this is more than just a model, a simulation, but it's really an interest in the issues relating to Africa, and interest of finding solutions to the problems that I identified, and also to learn more about the programs and policies and documents that Africa has produced.
Okay. And you mentioned some of the problems that Africa is experiencing right now. Do you mind listing some of the problems that may be in your top priority for you to combat at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. It would be a pleasure to do that. The first is to bring about peace in the continent of Africa, because peace is a sine qua non condition for the continent to develop, to do all the things that she wants to do. Next is to provide education, health, and conditions for people to use their capacities to give a contribution to the development of their countries, and as such to the entire continent. And these challenges require better organization, so institutional frameworks. Then it comes policies and legislation to inform action. You can only work well when you have good institutions, you have good laws and policies, sound policies, political governance, economic governance, and corporate governance. You need all of those things to have societies moving.
Understood, understood. You mentioned education. I'd like to ask you to elaborate on what your perception of the current educational status in Mozambique at the moment.
Mozambique is a developing country, like many African countries, developing countries. We have challenges in terms of education. We have come a long way in terms of access, because we came out of the colonial system with one university in Mozambique at independence, and only a few students could go to that university. Today we have more than 40 universities, public and private, and this has really allowed access to education. I'm talking about higher education, but we also want to expand, and we are expanding vocational training and even primary education to all levels. We are also doing literacy campaigns. We try to have adult education, because those people who didn't have the chance before independence to study, and today adults who didn't have a chance, those who want to get that chance, they're given an opportunity to do, including evening classes and things of that nature. And So the education system in terms of access has grown a lot since independence.
Okay.
Now the main challenge is quality of education.
Quality of education.
Yes, and the concern is you have children go to primary schools. When they finish primary schools, they are not well equipped to go to secondary schools,
okay.
but still they manage to get to secondary school. They barely manage to get there. When they get there, they have an education that gives them some tools, and they manage to pass to university. When they get to university, you will find that they are not very qualified to be at university.
Okay.
And then you have an uphill battle to improve quality of education even within universities. For instance, we didn't have private universities in the country. And to open a private university, you have to follow standards and have the license. Some would get licenses, but then it becomes a commercial enterprise.
Okay.
And quality was suffering and is suffering. But the government is now working with all these institutions. We have Council of Universities with the Minister of Higher Education and other members of the board who come from different institutions, civil society and others, who are discussing these problems and trying to improve the quality of education. So I would say that we made a lot of progress, but we still have many challenges.
Understood.
Yeah.
For someone who may not understand the depths of colonization, will you give us your point of view of how devastating colonization can be to a country, and what are the effects?
Yes, absolutely. Colonization has the problem of subjugation, of oppression of the local people. The local people or indigenous people are not given a chance to be free, to participate in any kind of institutions for their country, not given any chance to study. I remember when I was a child, my parents could not do more than just primary education. If they got primary education, it was great for them, and that was the basis to do very basic work, and that was the maximum. So our first black university students are very few, and they got there because of missionaries, Presbyterian Church, the Swiss missionaries who got them to study a little bit more and then take them outside. And at independence, we had very few blacks at university. Yes, so this is what colonialism was about. We had one university, but it was not for the local people, the Mozambicans. It was for the Portuguese who lived there, who were running the country. Yes. So when you limit that opportunity of education, that means you also put in a ceiling on the opportunities that the people of the land will have. So that's what colonialism does, apart from the old oppression and political prisoners for no specific reason. If they see that you're vocal about some social issues, you become a political prisoner. And of course, then there was the liberation struggle, which started in Tanzania. The freedom fighters fled Tanzania, but some of them had connections with the people in Mozambique who were also fighting the same struggle from within. Yeah, some of them spent years and years in prison because they were discovered by the secret police of Portugal and imprisoned. They suffered a great deal of torture to try and get information about others or suspects or the contacts they had in Tanzania and elsewhere. Yes.
So they were pretty much breaking laws by trying to survive helping their own people.
Absolutely, that's what that they were doing, and they're trying to help those who are in Tanzania and elsewhere around the world fighting for liberation to have information from within, because you still need to generate information to work on strategies and plans for the liberation struggle.
Do you mind revisiting how your life was in the middle of the Civil War
Yes.
in Mozambique? Can you kind of take us through what it was like
Yes.
in that time?
I grew up in the countryside of Mozambique, about 80 kilometers, that would be 50 miles from Pugh, the capital city of the country. I went into missionary school, Catholic missionary school.
Okay.
We knew what was happening in the country, in the countryside, what the church was doing, but we didn't know much more. Then the violence started in the central part of the country, very far away from where I was living, and but then it spread because it started with the southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. It was supported by the secret services of southern Rhodesia because Mugabe and his team, they wanted to liberate Zimbabwe, and they were in Mozambique. They lived in Mozambique in exile, and the Portuguese would, sorry, not the Portuguese, but the Rhodesians, the white Rhodesians, would then create a movement from within with Mozambicans who were made to turn against their own government to fight. And when, to fight the government, when Zimbabwe became independent in 1980, that group was transferred to South Africa because you still had apartheid system, and the apartheid system also didn't want Mozambique to develop because they thought Mozambique was socialist, communist, and was against them, and Mozambique was supporting the ANC, the African National Congress of South Africa, and indeed we had freedom fighters from South Africa living there, including President Jacob Zuma. He lived in Mozambique for many years, has ANC representative there, and many of his comrades. And so the apartheid system was strong militarily, and they equipped this small group of people, Mozambique National Resistance Movement, and they spread the struggle, this kind of terrorist kind of attacks against the people, the homes, and displacing many people around the country. And of course, the national army of the government was trying to reach, but when you have a guerrilla warfare, the problem is, where do you go? Where do you find them? They are in the bush, and even one, if he goes into a civilian village, kills people, you can only get there after they have gone, and you go after them.
It's more reactive than anything.
Exactly, it's more reactive than anything. And these started coming down to the southern part of the country where I was. So in the meantime, I had moved to the city to study. After the primary education in that area, I went to the city to study. And then my mother still lived in that place. Because of that violent conflict that had no choice of who to kill, my mother had to move from where she was living with my younger brothers and sisters to a place called closer to the main highway, which had troops patrolling the highway, so they would protect the populations around them.
Really?
Yes, but even those places started to be attacked. So she had to move again from there to the main town, which was about 10 kilometers or 5 miles from where we were living. And she lived with Catholic nuns, with my younger brothers, so that they could go to school. And they had to change their school to go to that school in that town. And this story of mine affected almost everyone in that community, in all parts of the country where this warfare was happening. And the devastation was immense. In the 1980s, there was the US government had some conservative people who were supporting the rebel movement because they thought they were fighting communism in the country. But that position changed when a gentleman called Roberto Gersoni wrote a report speaking of the atrocities of those in the bush. Saying they're killing and maiming people, cutting limbs and ears and things like that. And he spoke about killing about 100,000 people in a short period of time. It was called the Gersoni Report, after the name of the person who produced it. And the government then started moving in a different direction, less support, but you still have those conservatives who had lines of communication and supporting.
All right, Ambassador, we would like to get a view. I like to say we're going to get a peek into your soul, if you don't mind.
Yes.
We talked a lot about your history. We talked a lot about your journey. We talked a lot about your current situation as ambassador.
Yeah.
And your political involvement and some of the things that you are concentrating on right now for not only Mozambique, but how we communicate with the United States overall.
Yeah.
We want to know what keeps you motivated personally. What is something that you visit mentally to get you up out of bed every morning, to help you sleep better at night? What makes you tick?
Well, it's a sense of duty, a sense of fulfillment, because I think I'm making a significant contribution to the development of my country by the work I do. One, getting Mozambique to be known abroad, and also presenting the image, the real image as I see it and as I experienced it abroad, and promote partnerships and business investments and things like that into the country. And I know that these things will make Mozambique better. I know that every Mozambican will benefit for something good of what I do. And I have this sense of fulfillment. At the end of each day I say, what have I done? How is this going to help my country? So that makes me happy and sleep well, and a sense of duty and accomplishment.
Understood.
Yeah.
What books do you read?
Well,
or have read or are reading at the moment? What kind of authors do you like? What kind of books do you like?
Well, I read different kinds of books, and I try to broaden the horizon of my knowledge. I'm a political science person because I'm a diplomat, so I read a lot of political science books. For instance, the books that I've been reading a lot have to do with international relations. And one in particular, one author in particular that I like most is Professor Nye from Harvard University. He writes about soft diplomacy. That's something that he developed. And he talks about even the US, the last book that I bought from his writings is The Paradox of American policy, foreign policy.
All right.
And it talks about soft power. How are we using our power as America and Americans to be in the world?
Right.
And he defends the idea that most of the time, we use a lot of military power, and that's hard power. But we can actually achieve more if we use more of the soft power. Everyone wants to be like an American because of the movies we see, because of the music we hear. You know, Jay-Z is very famous all over the world, all over Africa.
Right.
Beyonce is known everywhere.
Yes.
So these are the softer things, but here I'm talking about just music, entertainment.
Okay.
But he's talking about values of the Americans that can be developed. And I read the books written by President Obama, Audacity of Hope, Dreams from My Father, and he also says one thing that I loved in the Audacity of Hope: no nation likes to be bullied, meaning exactly the same thing as Professor Nye is saying. You talk to nations, you bring your values, you make yourself respected because they admire the way you live and they want to emulate what you do, and you don't force those values into them. You convince them that this is the right thing to do, and they will want to do.
Understood.
So I love those books, but those are the books about my line of work. When I leave the line of work, I read a lot of Mozambican books.
All right.
And there are great writers in Mozambique who write stories sometimes, most of the time actually. They write stories about the country in the past, in the present, and where we want to go in a romantic form.
And what language do they use?
Most of it is in Portuguese.
Portuguese,
yeah,
okay.
They write in Portuguese.
Okay.
I read Nia Couto, I read Paulina Chiziane, I read Nelson Saud, I read the poems by José Craveirinha, and a number of other authors like Ongulani Bakakosa. These people write about the stories of Mozambique and in a very romantic way, sometimes in fictional ways that really is enjoyable to read. And some of them have been translated into German, into English. Some have been made into movies. Some of these books, and I love to read them. I read also books by Chinua Achebe.
Okay.
He is a Nigerian who also is known for the famous book Things Falling Apart, and many other books that he has written. I also read other African books, but also here I read poems by Maya Angelou. I read other books by other authors that don't come to mind immediately, but I also like those major quotes books. From, for instance, African American book of quotations, and also other books by quotes from all Americans, intellectual Americans from all walks of life. And yeah, those are the things that I love. And the music as well is so wonderful. I like jazz, I like soul music, R&B, pop, and yes, I love the rhythm, I love the messages, and I love to go to the movies as well. I have an artistic family. I have my second daughter had her first degree in screenwriting and producing for film and television.
Okay.
And she did a master's degree in gender, society and representation.
Wow.
She's putting the two together. So we discuss all the film. We go to the movies a lot. Our 15-year-old boy loves to go to the movies. He sees a lot on the internet, and we discuss this.
Ambassador, it looks like we have to stop.
Yeah.
Yes, we're running. That's the last question.
Yes. Yes. So we go to the movies a lot, and we discuss this over dinner table at home.
All right.
Our first daughter, she works as a development consultant because she did development studies.
Okay.
But she's also a musician. She sings for a band in Mozambique.
Okay.
And we discuss music. So I love Mozambican music as well. And I dance to it, of course.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So
yeah.
I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your sacrifice of just allowing us to get to know you a little bit better today. For our last segment, we're just going to ask you to talk to that young person,
yes.
That young man or that young woman who is probably experienced some of the same things you experienced.
Yes.
And they are looking to do some of the similar things that you've done. If you don't mind, look into the camera and
yes.
tell these young men and young women what they can do.
My message is that whatever background you have, whatever traditions and culture you have, take the values of your culture and strengthen your being. Learn from adults because they have the experience of life. Learn from your peers and try to be critical about everything, but above all, try to learn every day in your life. Learn from the young, from the peers, and from old, and try to make a difference and live life positively. Be an optimist because wherever you are, in whatever situation, you are much better than many who are suffering in my own country. So consider it a privilege to be in school, to be able to do what you do in life.
Ambassador Carlos dos Santos, thank you very, very much for allowing us to visit you today. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for talking to our audience. And we wish you a successful remainder of your stay here in Statesboro, Georgia, at Georgia Southern University.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for welcoming me. I'm being very well treated here. Great people in this Statesboro town. I love it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.